قد أفلح المؤمنون.
Number two is al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, which is, I think many of the audience, people who have been following this series, are saying to themselves, it's about time. I was worried that al-Hurr was not going to be on this list. How could you not talk about the companions of al-Husayn and not talk about al-Hurr? That's crazy. And so al-Hurr ibn Yazid is number two. And you might be thinking, well, Sayf, who is number one? When I do top 10 lists, no one knows who my number one is. My number one is always a mystery up until the very end. And I have my reasons for this, and you will see, inshallah, who my number one pick is. But my number two pick, for my favorite companions of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, is al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. And al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi is truly something special. As in, I get choked up even when I remember him. And, you know, al-Hurr is one of those people. There are some people that Allah created, you look at them and you say, Subhanallah. You say, Subhanallah, perfect is Allah. Subhanallah, who created such a person, who guided such a person, who, you know, allowed such a person to reach such a status. Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi is the repentant knight of al-Husayn's army. His cavalier whose sword kept the enemy away from the Prophet's grandson, earning him praise from the believers on earth and the angels in heaven forever. Our noble master, free in this world as well as the hereafter, al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, the martyr, may Allah have mercy on him. So his ancestry is given as follows by Hisham ibn al-Kalbi in his Jamarat al-Ansab, page 213 to 216. He says the following. He says, al-Hurr ibn Yazid, and he doesn't say this at one point, he gives the lineage in tabaqat form. So his ancestry is al-Hurr ibn Yazid ibn al-Najiyah ibn al-Qa'nab ibn Attab ibn al-Harith ibn Amr ibn Hammam, or Hammam ibn Bani al-Riyah ibn Yarbu' ibn Hanbala, and he belongs to one of the branches of the Tamim tribe. As in, if someone had their lineage to al-Hurr, we could trace the lineage back to Tamim. So his ancestry, his pedigree is very, very well accounted for. It's very well attested. So let's go over the story of al-Hurr. Al-Hurr's first encounter with al-Husayn. This is reported in Tarikh al-Tabari in volume 19, page 92, as well as in Sab al-Ashraf, volume 3, page 380. And we read the following. And this is from the Maqtal of Abu Abdullah, the combined reports. It says, when al-Husayn arrived at a place in Iraq called Dhu Hisham, he ordered his tents to be pitched. Then 1,000 men under the command of al-Hurr bin Yazid arrived, coming from al-Qadisiyah on behalf of Ibn Ziyad's chief of police, al-Husayn ibn Tamim al-Tamimi. As we see, al-Hurr and his men, his cavalry, about 1,000 men, came to al-Husayn salamullah alayh, and they faced him in the heat of the midday. So al-Husayn is in Iraq. He's not quite at Karbala yet. He's not in al-Kufa, obviously. So al-Hurr and 1,000 men, they intercept him and they lock him in place. He can't move. So al-Husayn ordered his attendants to provide the people with water, to quench their thirst, and to give their mounts water to drink little by little. The attendants stood and gave the mounts a little water at a time. But first the attendants stood and gave the people water to drink until they quenched their thirst. Then they began filling their bowls, basins, and cups. They took them to their mounts. When a mount had drunk 3, 4, or 5 draughts, the water was taken away and given to another mount until they had all been watered. I want to point out a few things here. This is very painful. May Allah give me the strength. As I give this lecture, I am fasting during the month of Sha'ban. And even now, just fasting for a few hours, the thirst is very difficult to deal with. Al-Husayn salamullah alayhi, him and his men are traveling through the desert, and they're intercepted by al-Hurr. And Imam al-Husayn, what does he do to these men? He extends his water supply to them. And not only that, he gives their horses water to drink. And if you've ever seen a horse drink water, if you've ever been to a farm, if you've been to a zoo or wherever, if you see when they give horses water to drink, you feel like a large bucket. You feel like a large, a trench sometimes of water. And they, the amount of water they can drink is absolutely insane. You see just how much water they take. And so Imam al-Husayn had ordered that his men, his attendants, water the horses of al-Hurr's army, not just the army of al-Hurr. So when the time for Dhuhr came, al-Husayn gave a sermon explaining why he had come to Iraq. And we will go over this in al-Husayn's biography. We then read that al-Husayn salamullah alayhi, and this is, I'm reading from al-Tabari, page 93 to 94, as well as al-Baladhri, volume 3, page 380. It says that al-Husayn offered for al-Hurr to lead them in prayer, but al-Hurr rejected and asked that al-Husayn lead them in prayer. The two armies prayed together, with al-Husayn being the leader of the prayer. When the time for Asr came, al-Husayn again came out and spoke, and he addressed al-Hurr's men and emphasized the rights that he and his household had over the Ummah, telling them that he had only come when he received their letters, requesting that he come to take over the affairs. If they had reneged on their request, he would return. He then had Uqba ibn Sam'an, who was the servant of his spouse al-Rabab. He had him bring forth saddlebags filled with the letters he was referring to. Al-Hurr denied any knowledge of the letters, emphasizing that he must follow the orders he had been given, and that he must take al-Husayn to Ibn Ziyad in al-Kufa. Al-Husayn refused, saying that death would come before this. He then ordered his party to prepare to move out. Now this is one of the famous moments of al-Hurr. This is a moment that many people remember in the biography of al-Hurr ibn Yazid, is that when al-Husayn ordered his men to move out. And this is recorded, I believe, in Tabari, page 94 to 95. And then on Baladhri, page 381. The page is right after the ones we just went over. So these events are happening right after the other. When al-Husayn said this, al-Hurr's men got in between them and the direction they were traveling. So when al-Hurr and his men saw that al-Husayn was trying to move out, they blocked him. And so al-Husayn called out to al-Hurr, "May Allah deprive your mother of you. What do you want?" So al-Hurr answered, "By Allah, if any of the Arab other than you were to say that to me while he was in the same situation as you, I would not leave him without mentioning his mother's being deprived of him. I would say it to whoever he might be, but by Allah, there is no way for me to mention your mother except by saying the best things possible." There's a very important lesson here, is that when we look at the mukhalifin, we look at people who are not on our aqidah, they're not on our path. When you see that there are people among them, they don't have that nasb, they don't have that evil in them, or they're willing to mock the Ahlul Bayt, to mock the Shia of al-Muhammad, when they're being reasonable, that's often the first step. That's when you see that there is hope for that person. And this is al-Hurr. Al-Hurr is saying, you say, "May my mother be deprived of me." If anyone else on earth had said this to me, I would reply by saying the same about his mother. But I cannot, wallah, I cannot mention your mother Fatima except by saying the best things possible. This is a very important moment for al-Hurr, because at this point he's the enemy, he's the opposition. He is committing a heinous crime. He is committing a crime for which he would deserve to be cursed from now until the end of time, were it not for what he does later. So al-Husayn again asked him what he wanted, and he replied that he wanted to go with him to the governor Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Al-Husayn replied, "By Allah, I will not follow you." So al-Hurr replied, "By Allah, I will not let you go anywhere else." And these statements were repeated 3 times. When their conversation was getting more intense, al-Hurr said, "I have not been ordered to fight you. I have only been ordered not to leave you until I bring you to al-Kufa. If you refuse to do that, then take any other road that will neither bring you to al-Kufa nor take you back to Medina, and let that be a compromise between us. I shall write to Ibn Ziyad, and you shall write to Yazid ibn Muawiyah if you wish to write to him, or to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad if you wish. Perhaps Allah will cause something to happen that will relieve me from being troubled in any way by your affair. Therefore take this road here, and bear to the left of the road to al-Udayb and al-Qadisiyah." So al-Hurr is essentially giving Husayn, and we've heard this excuse many times, we've seen this many times, "I'm just following orders, I'm just doing my job, I don't want any problem with you, but I'm simply following orders." And this is something very important, is when we read about various atrocities that are committed throughout human history, perhaps the most famous one you've heard of is the Holocaust, is that this is something that is commonly used. I was just following orders. And again, this is a very powerful lesson. And Hurr himself, his biography is a very powerful lesson. The danger of what happens when you carry that excuse all the way through. Because as you see, al-Hurr is going to eventually realize that that is not a good enough reason for what he's doing. So we read, furthermore, this is in Tarikh al-Tabari, page 96 to 97, and then al-Baladri, volume 3, page, you see here, page 382. Again, the narrative is just continuing right where we left off. It says, after this, Imam al-Husayn salamullah alayh and his caravan took the route of Udayb al-Hajanat and al-Qadisiyah, and al-Hurr along with his army followed them. Although al-Hurr did not have the order to start a war with al-Husayn salamullah alayh, the possibility of military confrontation had been worrying him from the start. So al-Hurr started to travel alongside him while saying to him, Husayn, I remind you of Allah with regard to your life. For I testify that if you fight, you will be fought, and if you are fought, you will be killed. To his concern, al-Husayn replied by reciting a poem, saying he was not afraid of death and martyrdom fi sabilillah. Al-Husayn set off with his followers, and al-Hurr marched by him. So we see here that what is happening is that al-Hurr is essentially shadowing al-Husayn, waiting for something to change in the situation, hoping that al-Husayn will submit, and al-Husayn refuses to submit. So they're basically locked in place, where al-Husayn can't go to Medina, he can't go to Kufa, he's just forced to roam in the desert with al-Hurr shadowing him. And in Udayb, 4 of the Shia from Kufa joined al-Husayn, and we already covered this. Al-Hurr intended to arrest or send them back to Kufa, but the Imam prevented him. They told the Imam about the tense situation in Kufa, the martyrdom of Qais ibn Musr as-Saydawi, who was al-Husayn's envoy to Kufa, and the preparation of a great army to confront the Imam. And this is reported in Tarikh al-Tabari, page 97 to 98, and in Sab al-Ashraf, volume 3, page 382. Finally, when al-Husayn and his group and al-Hurr and his group reached the district of Nainawa, a village near Karbala, a messenger arrived from Kufa with instructions to force al-Husayn to camp in the open desert in a place without fortification and water. And this is something that we went over before. This is in volume 19, page 101 to 103. And this is why al-Husayn ended up in that area, which was previously called al-Athar, and today we call it Karbala. So Imam al-Husayn salamullah alayh was prevented from going to either Nainawa or al-Ghadiriya, and so on the 2nd of Muharram in the year 61 after Hijrah, fatefully he set his camp in the desert land of Karbala in a location which was without water. And this is reported by Shaykh al-Mufid in his Kitab al-Irshad as well, in volume 2, page 84. So let's stop here and look at this man. Let's look at his destiny. We see here that this man is a soldier following orders, and he is a good soldier. He is the governor gave him an order, and he was carrying it out to the T. Correct? He was willing to stop al-Husayn. Al-Husayn had given him water. He showed him no compassion whatsoever. The one thing that we see that he did is that when it came to Sayyidah Zahra, salamullahi alayha, that his conscience would not allow him to attack al-Husayn or to attack his mother. Correct? But at the end of the day, he's still a soldier following orders. And what he essentially did is he locked Imam al-Husayn in place. He held him down until the rest of Yazid's forces arrived. Had this been any other man, this man would perhaps may even be more reviled than a Shimr himself within the modern Muslim community, as he had committed such a heinous crime of doing this to Imam al-Husayn and treating him this way. Correct? But now look at what happens next. Look at how things change. And so these events that I'm about to narrate for you, they come from al-Tabari in volume 19, page 127, as well as al-Baladri in volume 3, page 397 to page 398. We see that when the 10th of Muharram finally came, Umar ibn Sa'd came out to his men, and he began to divide his army. He began to marshal his forces, and this is the order of battle for Umar ibn Sa'd, and he began to place various people in command of certain units. So al-Husayn ibn Tamim was in charge of the reserves, Azar ibn Qais was in charge of the cavalry, but the man he put in charge the quarter of Tamim was al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi al-Tamimi. So he put him in charge of that group. So this report, by the way, comes to us in Tarikh al-Tabari, volume 19, page 121 to 122, if you would like to see Umar ibn Sa'd's order of battle. And interestingly, I always point out that it says the quarter of Medina. So all those people were like, oh, the Kufans killed al-Husayn. So how come no one ever brings up the fact that a fourth of that army, of the 4,000 men that directly fought al-Husayn, were from Medina? For some reason, no one ever brings that up. In any case, Adi ibn Harmala reports, and this is from the Maqtal, that when Umar ibn Sa'd began to march forward, al-Hurr ibn Yazid said to him, "May Allah make you prosperous. Are you going to fight this man?" He replied, "By Allah, it will be a battle, the least part of which will be heads falling and severed hands flying." Al-Hurr asked, "Are you satisfied with one of the three proposals that he offered you?" Umar ibn Sa'd answered, "If the matter rested with me, I would accept, but your governor has refused." So Al-Hurr is trying to reason with Umar ibn Sa'd. He says, you can't seriously go through with this. You're going to kill the grandson of the Prophet? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said, yes, there's going to be a battle. We're going to kill him. These are the governor's orders, and we have to carry out these orders. Al-Hurr went and stood apart from the people. So he separated himself from everybody else. With him was a man from his tribe called Qurra ibn Qais. So Qurra ibn Qais al-Hurr asked him a question. This is a question that keeps me up at night. It's a question that will forever make my days as dark as the night until the 10th of Muharram comes every single year. He said to him, Qurra, have you watered your horse today? So Qurra said no. He said, don't you want to water your horse? As in he was trying to get Qurra away from him. But we see here that on that day, a horse, an animal, was free to drink from the water of Nahr al-Furat, but not Aba Abdullah al-Husayn. Not al-Husayn, not the sons of Bani Hashim, not the Ansar, not Abdullah al-Radiyah. So Qurra reported later, I thought that al-Hurr was going to leave the battle, and he did not want to be present. But I was unwilling that I should see him when he did that, for he was afraid that I might find fault with him for that. So I said, I have not watered it, but I am going to water it. So Qurra ibn Qais is like, I thought he was trying to run away, but he was too ashamed because I was there. So I decided, I would give him some space. So I gave him some space. I'm like, okay, I'll go water my horse. By Allah, he says, I left him where I was. By Allah, if he had told me what he was intending to do, I would have gone with him to al-Husayn. And I wish we could say we believe you. It's easy to say afterwards you would have been one of them. But in that moment, where were you? Whose side were you on? Al-Hurr, it is reported, he began to approach al-Husayn little by little. One of his tribe called al-Muhajir ibn Aus asked him, what do you want, ya ibn Yazid? Do you want to attack? He was silent, but a great shudder came over them. Al-Muhajir said, by Allah, Ibn Yazid, your behavior is suspicious. By Allah, I have never seen you act like this before. If I asked who is the bravest of the Kufans, I would not ignore you. What is this that I see in you? And again, they think he's trying to run away. They think he's trying to get away from this. Like, Hurr, you're one of the bravest men I know. What are you doing? Why are you acting like this? What is this that I see in you? So Al-Hurr replied, he answered, by Allah, I am giving my soul the choice between heaven and the fire of hell. By Allah, I will not choose anything before heaven, even though I am cut to pieces and burnt. So he whipped his horse and he joined al-Husayn. Salamullahi alayhi. And so the report that I'm going to read from now, it comes from al-Tabari, volume 19, page 127 to 128. So this is what, going back to what I said earlier, Al-Hurr was a good soldier. But being a good soldier is not enough to get into heaven. How the hell will be filled with lots of good soldiers. You want to know what a real soldier is the one who fights for al-Husayn. Is a man who makes the decision that Al-Hurr did. That's what it means to be brave. That's courage. Is to look at the situation and say yes. But the bottom line here is I'm choosing between heaven and hell. I'm going to get cut to pieces. I'm going to be ripped to shreds. I will be branded a traitor, I will be called a coward, but at the end of the day, this is wrong. And I refuse to continue convincing myself that this is an order that needs to be carried out. Allah and His Messenger and His Ahlul Bayt take precedence over everything. And so the report tells us that he whipped his horse and he joined al-Husayn, salamullah alayhi, and he said to Aba Abdullah, may Allah accept my soul for you, Ibn Rasulullah. I was your companion who stopped you from returning. I accompanied you along the road and made you stop in this place. And those of you who understand the ahadith about repenting, the first part of repenting is acknowledging that you did something wrong. By him other than whom there is no deity, I did not think that the people would refuse to respond to what you have offered to them and that they would ever come to this position with regard to you. I had said to myself, I do not care if I obey these people in some of their authority, while they do not consider that I have discredited totally their obedience. For in the long run they will accept these proposals that al-Husayn offers them. By Allah, if I had thought that they would not accept them from you, I would not have joined them against you. I have come repenting to my Lord for what I have done, and offering you my life as consolation so that I may die before you. Will you accept that as repentance from me? Al-Husayn replied, yes, by Allah. Yes, Allah will accept your repentance and forgive you. What is your name? And this is really interesting because he knows his name. They've already met, they've already talked multiple times. But he's like, remind us, what is your name? I am al-Hurr ibn Yazid. And so Al-Husayn said, you are the free man. Al-Hurr, as your mother named you. You are a free man, Al-Hurr, in this world and in the hereafter, inshallah. So dismount. So this goes back to a poem that is famously recited about Al-Hurr ibn Yazid. I believe it was mentioned earlier in Jamharat Ansab al-Arab regarding Al-Hurr ibn Yazid. It is a poem that is very famous that the Tamimis used to recite. They say, نعم الحر حر بني الرياح وحر عند مختلف الرماح. What does this mean? This poem is very difficult to translate, but it's very, very powerful. It says, the best of free men is the one from Bani Riyah, the one who was free between the heads of the spears. حر عند مختلف الرماح. That's what it means to be free, is to set yourself free the way Al-Hurr did, by joining Al-Husayn. And so Al-Hurr affirms this for him. He says, you are Al-Hurr, just as your mother named you, in ad-dunya wal-akhirah. So he told him, so dismount. And this is also very interesting. I want you to pay attention to this. Imam Al-Husayn is telling him, get off your horse. Fight on foot. So he replied, I would be better for you as a horseman than I would be as a foot soldier. I will fight them on my horse for a while. Dismounting will be my ultimate end. So Al-Husayn said to him, do whatever you deem wise. May Allah grant you mercy. Al-Hurr then advanced in front of his followers, in front of the men who had been put under his command, and he said, people, aren't you going to accept one of the three proposals that Al-Husayn proposed to you? And these proposals, we'll discuss them inshallah in more detail when we cover Imam Husayn salamullah alayhi. So that Allah may grant you release from making war against him and fighting him. They answered, the general is here. Is Umar ibn Sa'd, speak with him. So Umar answered, I am anxious. If I could find a way to do that, I would do that. And we see this many times with Umar ibn Sa'd. He's such a coward. He's always giving excuses to try to justify this crime that he's committed. So then Al-Hurr said, people of Al-Kufa, may your mothers be deprived of their sons, and may tears come to their eyes. You summoned him. Then when he had come to you, you handed him over. You claimed that you would fight with your own lives for him, and then you have begun to attack him in order to kill him. You have laid hold of his life, you have seized his throat, you have encircled him on every side in order to prevent his returning to Allah's broad land, where he may be secure and where his family may be secure. He has come to into your hands like a prisoner who no longer can attract benefit to himself, and cannot secure himself against harm. You have prevented him, his women folk, and his followers from the water of the flowing Euphrates, which Jews, Magians, and Christians may drink from, and which the pigs and dogs of Sawad wallow in. Now they are likely to die of thirst. How wickedly you have treated the offspring of Muhammad. May Allah not give you water to drink on the day of thirst. If you do not repent and do not desist from what you are set upon this day and this hour. And some of the foot soldiers of Ibn Sa'd's army attacked him, and he went and stood in front of Imam al-Husayn. This is reported by al-Baladri in volume 3, page 397, page 398. Now we'll go over some of the actions of al-Hurr during the battle itself. And this was his last plea with the army of Ibn Sa'ad, his last call to them. As we see the same thing, Zuhair had done the same, Habib had done the same. The companions of Imam al-Husayn, many of them had tried to reason with these people, but there is no reasoning with people like this. And so one of the duels of Karbala, which is one that he took part in, is very famously recorded. This is reported in Tabari's book, in volume 19, page 136, as well as in Ashab al-Ashraf, volume 3, page 400. And I'm basically combining these two reports here. So, An-Nadhr ibn Salih Abu Zuhair al-Absi narrated that when al-Hurr had joined al-Husayn, a man by the name of Yazid ibn Sufyan had declared he would kill al-Hurr. So when they saw that al-Hurr had defected to al-Husayn, this man, Yazid ibn Sufyan, la'inahullah, had said that I will kill him for this. So when the battle began, al-Hurr was advancing to attack the people, and he recited the words of Antara, who's a famous warrior from the Jahiliyyah. I kept hurling my horse against them, neck and breast, until it was clothed with blood. His horse was struck on its ears and nose, and blood was flowing from it. Al-Husayn ibn Tamim, who was in command of the police of Ibn Ziyad and was sent by him to al-Husayn, was with Umar ibn Sa'd, and Umar had put him in charge of the armored police. Al-Husayn now said to Yazid ibn Sufyan, "This is Al-Hurr ibn Yazid, the man you wanted." He admitted that, and he went out towards him saying, "Al-Hurr ibn Yazid, are you ready to fight in single combat?" This is what we call in Arabic mubaraza. So Al-Hurr replied, "Yes, if you wish." He came forward towards him. Another claims to have heard Al-Husayn ibn Tamim say, so Ibn Tamim, remember, is one of the commanders in Ibn Sa'd's army. He said, "By Allah, as Yazid went out to fight, it was as if his soul were in Al-Hurr's hands. No sooner had he gone out against him than Al-Hurr had killed him. He then dueled Muzahim ibn Hurayth and dispatched him just as easily." This is reported by al-Tabari. Baladri attributes the death of Muzahim ibn Hurayth to Nafi' ibn Hilal, and Allah knows best whether Al-Hurr had killed one or two opponents here. Now, during the course of the battle, and this is reported in Tabari, volume 19, page 139 to page 140. During the course of the battle, we know Al-Hurr was a cavalier. He chose to fight on horseback, and his horse had been wounded many times already, as we have seen. During the course of the Battle of Karbala, al-Husayn's cavalry launched a devastating counterattack against Ibn Sa'd's cavalry. The attack was so vicious that Azra ibn Qais urgently demanded that Ibn Sa'd send him reinforcements to save his men from al-Husayn's cavalry, and Ibn Sa'd obliged him by sending in the archers under the command of al-Husayn ibn Tamim. These 500 men used their arrows to wound the horses of al-Husayn's men and forced them to fight on foot. Ayyub ibn Misrah al-Khaywani narrates, "By Allah, I wounded the horse of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid. I shot an arrow at its belly. At once the horse shook, turned over, and fell prostrate. Al-Hurr jumped from his horse like a lion with his sword in his hand, and he recited, 'If you wound my horse, then I am the son of a free man, braver than any lion with mane. I have never seen anyone accomplish what he accomplished.'" And this goes back to that moment between him and Imam al-Husayn. Imam al-Husayn tells him to dismount. A lot of people say, how could he disobey the order of the Imam? We say the Imam was not ordering him, he was advising him. He was Amr Irshadi. And we can see that the reason why is because al-Husayn could tell, if you fight on horseback, you risk getting injured like that. They're going to kill the horses at one point. And so Al-Hurr managed to jump off the horse before it could crush him. And so, regarding the martyrdom of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, this is reported in Al-Tabari in volume 19, page 144, as well as Al-Baladri, volume 3, page 403. We read the following. We read that as the battle raged on, eventually the time for Dhuhr prayer came. So Al-Husayn and his men wished to stop their fighting and to pray. But Umar ibn Sa'd's men wouldn't halt the fighting. Near this time, Habib ibn Mudahir was killed, which we have already covered, and Al-Hurr began to recite, "I swear that I will not be killed until I have killed. Today I will only be struck advancing. While I strike them with a biting blow with my sword, I will not be cowardly before them, nor will I run away. He also recited, I will strike my sword against these men of good repute, against these men of good repute on behalf of the best man who settled al-Mina and al-Khayf. He's talking about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he and Zuhair ibn al-Qayn fought fiercely against them. And as we went over before, when one of them attacked, if he became surrounded, the other one would free him, would jump in to free him from being surrounded. They both did that for some time until the foot soldiers attacked al-Hurr ibn Yazid and they managed to strike him down, killing him. And thus al-Hurr ibn Yazid, Allah Ta'ala alayhi, redeemed himself. He came to Karbala as an accursed man, the one who had prevented al-Husayn from leaving, from going to Kufa or even attaining water. But ultimately he attained martyrdom, fighting to defend the grandson of Allah's messenger. And for this reason, he stands as a symbol of redemption, the free man of Ben al-Riyah, free from blame on judgment, free in this world and free in the hereafter, al-Husayn's noble companion, Sayyidina al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi. And it is worthy to mention that al-Hurr, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, he dedicated his life, quite literally, to serve Abu Abdullah. He was martyred fighting for Abu Abdullah. But if you look at his descendants, many of them became very famous in the Shia community, and perhaps the most famous of them is his descendant, al-Hurr al-Amili, who's one of the great scions of Shi'ism in Lebanon, who's one of the great Shia scholars of Lebanon, who was responsible for the writing of perhaps one of our most important compilations of hadith, the Wasa'il al-Shia. And so we see that subhanAllah, we would say it runs in the family. Correct? And so, as the poet says, وَنِعْمَ الْحُرْ حُرَّ بَنِي الرِّيَاحِ. And al-Hurr is very, very special to me. He's special to every mu'min who finds themselves in a situation where they are racked by guilt for a sin, mistake they made in the past. And they, convince themselves that perhaps redemption is not attainable. Look to al-Hurr. None of us, I think, have committed a sin as terrible as what al-Hurr did. But al-Hurr redeemed himself. Correct? So, with that being said, we will conclude his biography and we will now go over my number one pick.